everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, Rob. It's me, Diana Perry Cruz, coming live next to you, in the chair next to you.
I'm moving the mic for you. There you go.
That was so sweet,
Wasn't it
Rob.
romantic?
So romantic.
Mic move.
Here's the mic. I'm Jackie McDonald, and I'm today not in the room with them, sitting next to them. I am at my own house, sitting alone.
That's
just
it?
by myself, because I don't live with you, even though some people think I do. It's like when teachers live at school. I don't live at school, and I don't live at Diana and Rob's house.
I know, listeners, if they see us in the wild, they get all freaked out. They're like, wait, were you going back to your house, your podcast house?
I love that. But
Not a thing.
I'm alone.
If we did have a podcast house, who'd be the leader of the house, do you think? Would it be me because I'm the host and you're only co-hosts?
It would be you.
That's how I announced it, not for any reason.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It
would be me.
The loudest ones.
I am the loudest, so no matter what room we were in of the house, I'd be able to say, everybody, let's go this way, which is what you say to people when you lead them around. I don't know if I'm a good leader, you guys. I just mostly tell people to stand over there.
Oh, I didn't
and stand over here.
I did not understand your segue.
You didn't understand the segue?
I got this segue and I loved it. I love that Diana did not get it. And that makes my heart so full.
Diana, you are in for a treat this episode we're about to do that you are nominally prepared to talk about. Thank goodness it's not just us.
Say what?
But we are very excited. Speaking of leadership skills and leadership practices, we're very excited to have returning to the show, Denisha Gingles. Denisha, we are so happy to have you on to talk about not just leadership practices, but culturally responsive leadership practices. We're going to get specific. So thank you so much for coming back.
Yes, thank you, Rob, for having me. And I have to do my introduction. I am live from Baltimore, Maryland, joined here by my beautiful doggy, Ollie. Was that good? I can be like your fourth co-host today. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. Yeah, when we have guests, they are the fourth. They're the fourth. I don't know, Denisha, if I mentioned this, so because you've been on a couple times now, because we did some special episodes, been on in other episodes. But one of my goals, and we all agreed we want to do this, is I read in a book about the Muppets once, how when Jim Henson would have people on the Muppet Show, the goal was the guest should feel like the most important person who is there. Even though like Kermit and his piggy and Gonzo are there too, the guest should always feel most important. So that was our goal, is if a guest comes on and says, I feel like I'm a member of the show, or I took over the show, then we did our job. That's our goal. So yes.
Absolutely.
We're excited. You be the leader.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to my podcast today. We're joined.
She's moved into the house, everyone. She's moved into the house. She's now the house manager.
Perfect.
So, Denisha, it's been a little while since you've been on the show. So for folks who either haven't heard some of your previous episodes or seen any of your talks or any of your publications, would you mind giving us a catch up to the present?
Yeah, sure. Oh my goodness. So I have not been doing much of anything, but a lot of everything lately. I have been, I would say, spending my time really in alignment. Like, I'm in the season of alignment. That's where I'll say I've been. Just kind of making sure that my life looks like liberation, that it feels like liberation. And so I've been really pushing myself to kind of build systems and stack habits that protect myself, my community, Black people, Black professionals, that actually leads to liberation instead of just including us and being everywhere. So yeah, I have been a little bit of everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I've also been doing a lot of work in my doctoral program. I'm currently a student and enrolled in an industrial organizational psychology program with a concentration on social justice. Excellent. So that's been very cool. Second year. Mm-hmm. Just got a few more to go, dissertation, and I'll be good. Also have been focusing on my clinical leadership and operational leadership at Sankofa Behavioral Health, which is based in Baltimore, Maryland. I always say that I'm very fortunate to serve as the founder. It's been quite a journey. I've learned so much through it. So I'm always in the trenches there, and also serving as the president of BABA, the Black Association of Behavior Analysts. So yeah, my work's just been kind of focused on sustainability and, trying to thrive, not just survive. And also having a good time because I am a full human being. I'm still young, got my legs, go outside, have a good time and frolic. So, yeah.
Ooh, that's good.
It's quite a list.
Yeah. So you got to be a student, which means kind of got to do some following, but you also got to be a student leader, and you got to be an actual leader in your organization, both your professional organization and your professional practice organization. So these topics of leadership and leadership practices, they're ones that you're both talking about, writing about, living and learning about at the same. You're doing it all at the same time. It sounds like.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, we're glad you're here to share all of that because there's a lot about leadership practices. I know you shared a number of articles with us that covered, some of them covered similar topics, but they all really covered different facets of the swath of leadership literature there appears to be. So before we go on, Dinah, would you mind sharing what articles will sort of be, and I don't think we're going to be discussing any of these like in exacting detail, like the kind of the bigger scope, and I think adding Denisha's knowledge to these is going to be the more interesting conversation. But we may dip in and out of a few of them. But what did we kind of base a lot of the kind of at least our understanding on today?
Okay, I'm gonna turn this. Yeah, so we have several articles that we will refer to within the context of this conversation, and they include application of the principles of anti-oppression to address marginalized students and faculty's experiences in counselor education by Sheikh, Gumaluru, Dar, Carter, Quigg, Ponce, Mason, and Peters. That was published in Teaching and Supervision in Counseling 2024. Also, Cultural Responsiveness Curriculum for Behavior Analysts, A Meaningful Step Towards Social Justice by Mather and Rodriguez. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2022. Mentoring for Admission and Retention of Black Socio-Ethnic Minorities in Medicine, a Scoping Review by Kimzeng, Bicolo, Jaunki, Mathieu, Constant, Oguntala, Ramani, Louise May, Medina, Kendall, Urubina, Hubert, Domet, and Fatsing. And that was in the Journal of Medical Education and Curricular Development in 2024.
You know it's a medical journal when there's 8,000 authors on it.
There sure were. And is this the last one? Nope.
No, there's two more.
The penultimate article, Exploring Aspects of Mentoring for Black and Minoritized Healthcare Professionals in the UK, a Nominal Group Technique Study by Sriram, Atwal, and McKay. And that was in the British Medical Journal Open. Weird title. 2024. And finally, Ubuntu Leadership, an Explication of an Afrocentric Leadership Style by Lalu in the Journal of Values-Based Leadership 2022.
Okay.
Can I tell you how much I loved reading the articles outside of the field of behavior analysis and what other fields do? Because I feel sometimes like we don't want to do that. And I've been doing it more and more because, so many fields are way better than us in a lot of ways. They've had more time.
Right. We should be drawing from other fields. Yeah. But we don't always have to recreate everything, every idea, right? Other folks have come before and done really good jobs of that. So
yeah. What a breath of fresh air.
I have like multiple certifications. So, I'm in counseling.
Yes.
And then obviously behavior analysis, and now industrial organizational psychology. And social justice is my background in general, but also now about to be on the academic side as well. So it's like, oh, yay, I get to naturally like branch out.
I love that.
Your subscriptions to Journal Bill must be getting like crazy long at this point.
It's like $2,000 a month.
I remember getting out of grad school like, I have a subscription to Java. That's all I need. I'll be fine.
I would say this one good thing, how people stay in school to avoid their bills, like to avoid paying back. Stay in school so that you can just get the journal articles for free.
That's right. The college library.
Mm-hmm.
It's your friend.
It's definitely my friend.
Speaking of journals, I think before we get into it, because I like to start every discussion by going on a slight tangent, and it would be, I'd love to hear more about your guest editorship in BAPS, because there was a special, I think it was even billed as like kind of an emergency issue on social justice, and that the Mather and Rodriguez article, which we'll be discussing a bit, was from that paper. But could you tell us a little bit about that process? The gathering articles, the roles of doing the guest editorship, putting it all together.
Yeah, it was quite a process for sure. For those who don't remember the context around it, so this was in the latest uprising that the entire world stopped. This was the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so collectively in this country, and we are in another uprising space, so I don't want to say like make it seem like that was the last and only. No, we're still uprising, but in that space at that time, there was a lot going on, and people were collectively hurt, and again, still collectively hurt, but we needed to make sure that powers that be were recognizing that people existed outside of the professional space. And earlier that year, there was an emergency series that was done for COVID, and Jonathan Tarbox had put that out through that. And so at that time, I called him out. I met Jonathan. We had a very cordial relationship, previous to that, but kind of called him out like, hey, what are y'all doing with this? Why is there no emergency issue on what's happening right now in the world? And we talked, and he's like, I feel like there's no one better to lead this charge. Can we put it together? And so there we created the emergency series for police brutality and systemic racism. And I was very clear that I didn't want this to be a performative measure. I'm not talking about it just so that people feel good about what they've done in this moment and just go back into what they've always done. It actually needed to be a moment that expanded what we thought of as scholarly, that actually represented the movement. I said to Jonathan at every point, I need to be able to turn every single last one of these papers into my fellow organizers, into the movement leaders that I know, and they feel like it represents what's actually happening. It can't just be what the scholars are saying is going on. And so I was very clear with that. Also very clear that who says it and who tells the story also matters, right? And so our editorial board was 90% Black and brown. And every person that was on the editorial board was from at least one marginalized community. My associate editors, Dr. Jamila Thompson and Watson Thompson, and also Dr. Kasten Anderson Carpenter. They were our associate editors. And then from there, again, we had our full editorial board. And it took a lot. We had to establish the processes. We had to figure out what we wanted to say. Also had to make sure that anyone that was submitting anything, that it felt in alignment with what was happening in the moment and the movement. And from there, it created a pipeline. Like Dr. Carpenter has gone on to be an editor-in-chief, as well as Dr. Jamila Watson has also done the same. And so that was also important to me, to know that the movement in the moment wouldn't stop there. So I was, I'm blessed to be able to say I'm the first Black editor-in-chief of any behavior analytic journal, but definitely it wasn't about the title for me. It was more so about shifting what we knew about behavior analysis, because we had other movements like this in our time, where you saw the scholarly research that was about in the 70s or so that reflected social justice principles. And then all of a sudden everything kind of went poof. And we were just talking about manding and toileting, right? And so, I wanted to make sure that we were able to do that and to be able to share my contribution in that way to our field. It feels good because I still see a lot of those authors that are still publishing and doing more things beyond publishing too. They're actually in their communities.
That's great. It really was nice to kind of have, it was a very trying time. It was a very difficult time, but just seeing how quickly, folks, like you and like Jonathan Tarbox with some of the COVID issue, just be able to sort of generate ideas and start getting the word out about something that wasn't, again, like you said, not performative, but either was not early, but early on for our field, not early on for a lot of the other fields, unfortunately for us, that we took so long to get back into that, socially valid, meaningful change talk. But it was really kind of nice to kind of kickstart that process with issues like the special issues like that. So thank you for that work. I'm sure it was super easy and everyone was like, I already got that paper done. And, just put it in and you send it online.
So easy. We got zero pushback. It was just amazing. Such a good time. Feel my sarcasm over the audio.
It was publication is such a notoriously slow process. And it can take years to get things through the pipeline. So it was refreshing to see how quickly people were recognized the importance of the moment and did what needed to be done to get that out on every single level. And I know that was a lot of work at every single level. So I appreciated it. And I was like, look what our field can do, right? We can respond to the moment. That was nice to see.
Yeah, I really have to give it up to the reviewer team, really, because if you've ever served on an editorial board, you know that you might review like 3 a year, nothing heavy. Our editors were pushing out these papers like, oh my gosh, like once a week. And and it's a labor of love, right? Like this stuff is not paid. Everybody went unpaid, and they did it for the greater good. And so really have to thank them for dedicating their time to the mission.
That's great. All right. Well, that is one example of leadership. So not totally unrelated to our topic, but I think good to hear some of that great background information and that historical information about your experiences. So when it comes to talking about leadership, there's so many different terms. We were talking right before we started recording about just like how much there is in terms of what's leadership. And a lot of it we'd consider it kind of either mentalistic, or it's not well defined, or it's kind of sounds like a little vibes based. But one of the things that I think definitely is worth having a clear definition between the two, or I'm curious if there is leadership versus mentorship, because I know some of the articles that we'll be discussing today really got into the idea of mentorship. And that seemed a little bit more around, say, career development versus, say, leadership, which could be that, but it could also be more like what we think of as supervision. I'd love to sort of hear, where do you define leadership and mentorship? How are they the same? How are they different?
Yeah, I do view them as different. I would say that mentorship is more developmental, like you're mentioning. There's some learning happens with leadership too, but there's some learning that's happening, and it's also didactic. Typically is between 2 people. There are models that you might have 3 or more people that are there, but typically speaking, it's didactic. So it's one person sponsoring or guiding another person, providing knowledge, and another person that's receiving. In a typical mentorship model, one thing I do want to share, especially in my journey, is being able to look beyond the typical structure, which is very hierarchical in nature. I just mentioned there's a giver and a receiver, right? Mm-hmm. And so learning to expand beyond that to be more communal and bidirectional, especially because we know, for me as a Black woman, I'm a mentor, but I'm coming from a marginalized community. And so what happens then to the mentor when you're put in a position of giving, and there's someone there that is only receiving? And so what happens is that it is replicating capitalistic structures where someone has to benefit from labor. And then on top of that, then creates an extractive dynamic, being extracted from by individuals. And I don't think that's really rooted in love or relational care. And so taking away or going off of those traditional mentoring frameworks where, again, it's found in capitalistic and colonial societies, it requires, in order for it to exist, that someone consumes. And so in my own journey, I know that I had to move beyond some of the traditional views of leadership, and I'm going to get to that next, but like servant leadership, for example, was something that I was kind of raised on. I used to talk about it a lot, but again, they're typically Western ways of being. And from there, I had to learn for myself that the unintended effects are inequity for your mentors. So yeah, the short answer is it's a didactic model of learning and receiving. The long answer is all that other stuff I just said.
And I know one of the themes in a lot of the articles that you had shared really gets into sort of some of the leadership, but a lot of the mentorship being really important for increasing diversity in any given field. And I know that ties, well into a lot of the kind of the culturally responsive practice that behavior analysis has written some about. Some people are practicing. I would like to hope that everyone is sort of resisting the culturally responsive practice push that the majority of our leaders would seem to want. But it does seem, even when some of those pieces are in place, there is a concern that just having good mentors doesn't result in change in diversity. It's not like, well, as long as we're aware of this, we'll mentor more diverse workforces. It kind of, maybe a little, but not. What is really important when it comes to saying, we want to increase diversity? What are you going to need in your leadership practices?
Yeah, so I think exactly why you're saying that is why I had to mention about typical mentorship, because that's exactly what happens. It's look, we have these leaders and they just so happen to be racially diverse or they come from these different backgrounds. And it's oh, well, guess what? you've just set everyone up for failure now, right? And so I do think that's where leadership comes in at, because leadership is the more structural, systemic side. Without good leadership, mentorship is just made to die, right? And so I think that as a leader, you have the ability to create the ecosystem and then like normalize what support actually looks like and then challenge the status quo. So again, in mentorship, which I feel like I hear a lot of it right now, it does nothing if it looks exactly how everything else looks. But you as a leader, you're the one that because we're all leaders, we get to say, we don't have to do it that same way. We can push beyond it so that these other people who are going to be put in mentorship positions can actually like thrive. And so if I'm defining then what leadership is, I think leadership to me is more of a social process where we then utilize different motivating operations to enable other people to contribute towards a collective goal or a mission, right? And so as a leader, I get to arrange the contingencies that support whatever the deliverable is inside of a system.
All right. So it's a factor of if you don't have both leadership and good mentorship, sort of like looking ahead, you're going to struggle to, if your goal is to increase diversity and to continue to advance individuals from, historically marginalized groups. If you don't have both, you're probably just going to see it, being nice, but not resulting in any change.
Yeah, of course. And again, going back to the hierarchical comment that I made, if we just think about leadership as just like a straight line, someone sits up here and we don't remember that a person is a person through other people, meaning that like leadership only exists in relationship to others, then yeah, things start to kind of fall by the wayside if we don't remember that.
Now, I know the Mather and Rodriguez article talked a lot about kind of the culturally responsive practices and then how that would tie into the idea of leadership. For folks who either didn't read that article or it's been a while since they've sort of thought about their own culturally responsive practices, would you mind kind of giving a quick summary of the idea of like looking at culturally responsive practices in relation to sort of like what we're doing in behavior analysis to improve that?
Yeah, so in this article, the authors really did a good job of trying to break down some behaviors that clinicians can start to consider even inside of the systems in which they operate, and understanding like the importance of CRT. And again, cultural responsiveness inside of our practices to look at the people that you're actually working with, the policies that are in place, and actually checking for these behaviors, whether through mentorship, someone observing you and making sure that there is an observable, measurable way of displaying all of the behaviors that they listed there. And so, yeah, I think that for us, it's a good starting place. If we're thinking about how am I more culturally responsive as a clinician, as a scholar, as a mentor, supervisor, it's a good starting place for us all to look at some of those behaviors that they broke down.
Hi, do you want to be a BCBA? Also known as a board-certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree, just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Sorry to interrupt our conversation with Denisha Gingles, but I want to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn one cultural/ethics credit for listening to the show. You're also going to need to enter in some key information by going to our website, abainsidetrack.com, where you'll put in some information about yourself, about the topic, and some secret code words that are from Denisha. And the first of those code words is liberation, Liberation. It's a lot of what we're talking about on this episode, the idea of how to use leadership practices that promote liberation. All right. Speaking of that conversation, let's get right back to it. So when it comes to sort of like, I'll use me as an example. I have certain responsibilities in which I might serve as a leader. I also have tried, and we've done a lot of episodes on this. I've done my own reflections in terms of looking at my own cultural responsive practices. Where am I doing reflection, looking at biases, looking at my own, hidden biases, looking at the structures kind of, from a CRT lens that would maintain that behavior, that could, dismantle some of those behavioral patterns. How does that turn more into being more of a culturally responsive leader? Is it just now that I'm using culturally responsive practices, I automatically get my culturally responsive leader badge? Or is it more a matter of there are certain steps that I now would find myself taking as a culturally responsive leader?
Rob only thinks about things in terms of video games.
If I'm not going to get a certificate or a crown to show how great I am at learning a new skill, what's the point, right? You gotta get the acknowledgement. Pat on the back stuff,
Yeah. Well, you definitely have to get your pat on the back. No. But I think a good question, though, because cultural responsiveness definitely can't be looked at as just like a checkbox. And I think, again, great starting point. I love this article. When you get to go through it and say, okay, somebody saw it. I got to the end. Yes. Like I'm culturally responsive. And it's like, okay, well, actually, it's a little bit more than that. It's actually about the behavior that's there. And so I think on top of that, like, yes, I'm glad that you could say that I've met this, but it's kind of like what we know about values. It's an ongoing process and there is no destination. The same thing that we've come to the conclusion of for cultural competency. You don't get to arrive and say, I am here.
Right.
And
competent.
And also throughout that process, if you're like, okay, I can display these things outwardly, but also let's see, I'm unwilling to challenge my own positionality. I'm unwilling to actually change systems of oppression for other people. Then yeah, you got the skill, somebody checked you off, but it's not really sustained. And then also that's when we start to toss out words like performative, right? And so I think that being able to not always, because I don't like to talk in always and nevers, but it's really important. In this case, it's okay. Always considering the policy. Like that is the part for other people and like what is going on with the system. Can I reduce these contingencies for others? Can I eliminate them? And so I think that's the biggest and most important part about being culturally responsive.
Now, some of the other pieces, when we talk about like what is the leader's job or what does the leader do? I know some of the articles really discuss the differentiation between, I am using my leadership techniques and I'm supporting the academic aspects of my organization or of my supervisees, whatever the structure you might have. But also differentiating that from the idea of kind of the social learning that goes into leadership. I mean, that generally makes sense to me, in reading it and in talking about it. But like, what would you say some of the differences are when you're a leader kind of academic versus a social learned skills?
Yeah, I think for academics, and I'm only in academia as a student, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm speaking for people who actually work in academia, but from what I know to be, it's like academic leadership typically is about your performance. And so what can you, and your output, right? Again, going back to how typical capitalistic structures work. So what are the grades? How many publications are you putting out? Like, have you reached tenure? Like, or do you have enough prestige to even reach that, et cetera? So I think that's what that leadership might be focused on. And like,
you're not wrong. Just putting it out there. I'm like nodding vigorously. I'm like, yep.
And it's like, oh yeah. So now someone's probably mentoring you and they're mentoring you with those things in mind, because that's what's important to the ivory tower. It's your publication. So then how do I teach you how to get more? How do I teach you how to do more? Right. Whereas like social learning, I think is more so about how do we grow as a collective? And it also like involves like that reflection part. So exactly how do you want to be inside of this space? Like we actually need to focus on that, not just that you're performing highly and pushing out those metrics? And also, do you even feel like you belong here? Again, I'm not in academia on that side, but I know what it feels like even as a student. I know from my other colleagues who are in academia, what I hear from them. And so, yeah, do you even get to feel like you belong in this space? And is this something that we can even bring into our conversation? So, yeah, I would say social learning it moves beyond like that measurable outcome being the end all be all.
I know kind of going into the different jobs between the leader and the mentor, but sort of both of them did seem to have responsibilities, especially if, a goal of the leader or the mentor is to improve the diversity in the field that they're working in, would really be to look at things like, I know the Shake All study, they had a very long list of anti-oppressive actions that one could take as a leader. And my only problem with that paper is the way they set up what the list and the principles were. They sort of chunked it weirdly, so you'd have the different numbers in different areas, which made it a little harder because I wasn't as familiar with the work of the anti-oppressive actions. So it was actually very actionable in that way, but it was a little hard to read at first. But in any case, we had all these anti-oppressive actions that one could take as a mentor, as a leader, and it kind of made me think a little bit more of, say, the Mather and Rodriguez article on culturally responsive techniques, and how much of that ties into our ethics code, or what's not in our ethics code, or what's kind of in our ethics code. And the same with the task list. Like if you squint, you can kind of see many of those practices in the task list, but it's really like not being directly taught anymore. Do you see, the current iterations of the ethics code and the task list as, effectively enough capturing the skills one would need to be a leader who practices anti-oppressive action? Or is it sort of one of those things where it's the spirit's there, but the specifics leading to action maybe need some work?
Yeah. So because I'm a founder of an organization and I also teach other people, under no version of our ethics code did I believe that it could allow us to capture anti-oppressive practices. I've literally been telling anyone that ever trained under me to please know that this is just a starting point. We actually need to do more. And so then you're going to learn from here what it looks like to start thinking about things beyond what the BACB has already put in place. And so I think for us, we kind of learn that this is just like what it means to be compliant to the BACB. Like this is just what they require. Oh, as long as you do that, then you should be fine, right? And so that kind of puts us then in a mindset of like how to avoid like liability, but rather than like this is how you promote justice. I don't think that was ever a space for us to consider. No. And so, yeah, I think it's different when you have things that say like do no harm, but like, okay, what does it mean to like do repair? Like, how do we actually do that? And not just the little simple, like, did you make sure to reach out to them one time before, So I would say we've always needed to expand our ethics code and, it does not reflect that. And we have way more work to do if we ever want that to be what it can do.
I love, and I want to bring up, and I know it wasn't part of our reading because I didn't know we were going to, I don't know why I didn't think we would talk about this, but the Baba March memo about the BACB taking out cultural responsiveness. I think you guys, if anyone's listening and they haven't read that memo that was released by Baba, I would encourage you to just type in Baba memo 2025 March. And I learned a lot just from that memo. I actually cited it in a recent paper that I am trying to get published because it really highlights the lack of focus that the BACB is giving to cultural responsiveness at this time. So I think that would be an appropriate dive. It's a fun little ditty that you can do when you're watching TV.
Jackie, don't read a memo of importance while watching TV.
That's like terrible. Commercials.
During commercials.
Right? It's
don't you look at the small screen while you have the big screen on? I mean,
yeah, and I'm doing because I'm like, let me Wikipedia this random 70s singer. Who cares if I
no one
pay
else
attention?
Is actually good at multitasking, but I am. I'm the one person who can take in.
You're the Neo of the multitasking matrix. That's great.
During commercials, you have time, and we all know that we don't have the premium subscriptions where there aren't commercials. So there are commercials, and that's when you can use your time wisely. You can get up, get a drink. And you can read this blog from March 2025.
You can do your jumping jacks.
Right.
You can't do all these things.
Some people do that. I've heard. I don't know.
It's too many things. Yeah. Pick one.
It's too many things.
Do it well.
But just
I do want to say too with that statement, one of the things with that statement, we made it very clear to remind people that even with DEI, it also was a starting place. I think people really get comfortable. They're like, oh, well, at least we have the DEI language, or like, oh, at least we have these like 1 or 2 goals that are written into our organization's goals that they've set. And it's like, I'm so sorry. Yes, that's wonderful. And we still have more work to do. So don't get comfortable. So I think it was really important for us to remember, even while we were saying we were disappointed in this, that we were, we shouldn't have been fully happy with what was already existing in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. In all of these examples, and I feel like it ties into the academia world too, just having like one line that says, oh, and make sure that you're applying culturally responsive practices across all areas. Make sure you're applying compassion across all areas, right? Like that's just not going to be enough. And that doesn't allow people to have a strong enough understanding of how to make that application. And that's true in academia too. You can't just be like, oh, and then we're going to have one day where we make sure we talk about cultural responsiveness, but it won't be tied into any of our other lessons or readings.
It'll be a separate
culture.
box within our book, and you can look to the side of the box.
Right, yeah, the side box, right? So it's a difference between having it be like the frosting layer on the cake or like the baked in layer on the cake. So we're trying to bake it in, but we still have work to do.
Yes, I love that metaphor. It's nice.
I mean, I guess kind of continuing on with that point, when we're looking at those practices, even when things were, it's hard to say, oh, there was so much. Remember 2020? Remember how much we all had great fun in 2020? Good, no. But man, I'm not loving 2025 that much for other reasons, different terrible reasons. But thinking of the moments when it was like, maybe we're on the right track, we're moving in that right direction. Where would you see sort of the biggest sort of, here are the actionable skills that are hinted at in the task list, they're hinted at in the code, and now with an eye towards culturally responsive practice, we can put into our leadership to sort of keep this going and accelerate this process? Like, are there specific either skills or tasks, whether they're from the Mather Rodriguez article or other ones that you've been kind of reflecting on since that was published, that you would say should be a part of the leadership kind of knowledge base or the leadership bag?
Yeah, I would say, I think one thing that, and this is probably gonna sound it like frou-frou, but one part of that is empathy is a starting point. Like that's a skill and a behavior that it can be shown in behavior. I think we need to like parse it out a bit more, but I would say, what does it look like to actually show empathy to our communities? It's difficult when you have all these like rules, regulations that people start teaching you. And I think it becomes so easy. People say, well, that's what the paper says. Right. And so I don't know, kind of like breaking that down in some type of way. I don't know, the redistribution of power is just like a really important, and again, how do they fit into a task list? The BACB would need to consult me on for it. I'm joking.
Love it.
But there needs to be ways that we teach people how to actually redistribute power and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the two things that's coming to mind right now. Like when I like critical things that I think is necessary, like the level of empathy, it goes beyond like just the basic. And so like I think sometimes it can be uncomfortable. And so not just using that as like yes, everyone should have empathy and consider others. What does that actually look like? Right. And obviously there are more skills like that are required to even show empathy. But I think that and knowing how to redistribute power are the top two.
Great.
So, I mean, I think some of those skills get into, I think one of the challenges that were brought up in many of these leadership papers of it's good to have individuals who are aware of these changes that need to happen, but there still is a bit of a dearth of individuals who can fluently practice some of those kind of, either whether they're anti-oppressive skills, whether it's kind of a knowledge of culture responsive practice. There's only so many people who can do this really well, which is not even necessarily the same as teaching other people to do this really well. And I know there have been some improvements in a lot of the kind of academic field in terms of our kind of next generation, trying to supervise more of those skills, making that a part of coursework. Jackie and Diane, I know you've done that, in your programs as well. But I mean, I'm not sure if it's quite where I don't think any of us would say it's probably where it needs to be in order for it to become a skill that even just empathy, like you said, Denisha, just making sure that's something everyone can do. We can all do empathy so well and then teach empathy so well. I don't know, Jackie, Diana, maybe you have more kind of direct line to what did it look like within creating programs and everything. And I know I didn't put this on the list of questions, so sorry, I'm throwing you on the spot. You got to talk about something you're not thinking of at the moment.
I'm just, I when you said those two things, I was like, swear word, those are two of the hardest things to teach in a graduate program, right? Because
that's why I asked you, because I know I can't do it. It's too, but you can. So hear the answer.
Thank you. But they're really hard, right? So empathy is a hard, because it's not a set of skills, right? We could teach someone just a set of skills, but they still might lack empathy after doing those skills, and it might even be worse, right? Because now it's seen as disingenuous. So I think I don't know the answer. I have been thinking about this answer a lot, to be fair, because I have been doing a lot of training with some students that don't necessarily have a lot of empathetic responses. And it's just, it never was taught, and it's not a skill that they have. And trying to incorporate that into like soft skills training has been really challenging, because they'll engage in the skills that I've operationally defined, but it's somehow falling short.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say one thing I've learned, like,
please,
about that? I've said it about behavior analysis, like, as soon as I got into the field. So my background, I started in psychology, started in counseling. So here I am, I have my master's degree in counseling, and then I find behavior analysis. And I found it really interesting that we were teaching our clients like flexibility, but then behavior analysts were not flexible at all. And I was like, whoa, hello, what's going on? And so I have learned, even through my leadership, the things that I write down as policy, because you need policy, right? You have to have policy. But unfortunately, what happens is this becomes so black and white. Y'all remember the days in our field where people said you couldn't even accept a drink of water?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because of what the BACB wrote in. That's literally what's happening. And so, like, I have to examine how I'm writing policy, because I know my person and my spirit and my aim behind the policy. But the moment that it gets written down, oh, you're the police. Like, people think that we can police other people through, well, Denisha, you wrote it. I wrote it because we needed to have some guidelines, and that's true. But now I have to write examples, non-examples, and be way more specific than I ever thought to be, which is like, okay, behavior analyst, technological, but it's like, way more technological. And so I think that that's just like what I've been learning on my journey, is to be like, think of all the non-examples truly that you can think of, which is an it's like you write things like, this is a non-exhaustive list. Sometimes, unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore. Like, you need to make the exhaustive list on like a lot of different things. And so, not to say that that makes it easier, but I am learning that. I just want to share that with you, Jackie, that I'm also learning too. What is getting in the way? And sometimes I think my own words get in my own way. My own policies get in my own way. And now I need to figure out a way to like kind of bring people back to the human behind just the black and white words that are written on this document.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself giving a lot of examples during class of the ways in which I have changed my thinking on issues, right? Or said, like, by the book, this is what it would look like. But then I looked at it as a human and said, why am I doing that? Right? Why would I ask someone, why would the goal be that someone can sit still for 2 minutes and wait for something without anything else to do? I don't do that. You don't do that. Right? Why are we teaching that? That's not a useful skill. Like, just as an example, to try to show people that at the end, it should be like your critical thinking and analysis. And if we have to make a decision, like, err on the side of humanity at the end.
There's a level, I think, in any of these discussions of, of updating practices, and certainly being more culturally responsive of, and again, I'm speaking, I'm guessing other people have felt this way, but some of it mostly specific to my own, my own journey, my own reflections of being able to sit with discomfort and, I know one of my huge frustrations with, it probably would have been 2022, 2023, right after COVID, right after, the Black Lives Matter, movement had become something that people were, very aware of and very supportive.
You were aware.
I was aware. Fine. My reflections, this is Rob's story time now. It's about me. Would be just this sense that it was hard. It was, I think people seemed like they were more ready to be in that discomfort because everything had just felt so wrong and just off kilter. And we all wanted something different. And I know for me, that made it very positive and made it a lot easier to reflect on things. I was still alive after this time. My family was still alive. My close relatives were still alive. We made it through. And so it was a little easier to sit with some of that discomfort. But I'm imagining students who are coming out of school in the next 2-3 years. And I don't think the American society is in a place where they are comfortable with any amount of discomfort. For a variety of reasons. But I think a lot of people are not in a place where they feel safe to be uncomfortable, which means I do see many of the small movements, the small changes that hopefully would lead to bigger changes really stalling out. And it feels very frustrating. And I'm like, well, I'll do my part, but my part is only so much part. It does feel like there's an overwhelming wave against anyone's single part.
Disagree.
You disagree? Okay. That's all you got?
I don't want to get us off track.
Well, tie it into the idea of leadership, as leaders, as folks who serve as leaders, whether, academic leaders, whether as social leaders, what are the steps we can do so that I guess we don't sound like, mopey Cathy's or who's the mopey character? Some mopey character who's like, I don't know, there's nothing we can do. I thought it was going to be better by now. Sorry, everybody.
Not to get too off track, but I feel like we are about to witness the power of the people, and our generation should be finding what that is. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about Ubuntu leadership to make sure that we're getting through all of our important questions.
All right, switching gears. So there are a lot of leadership theories. I really like the Ubuntu, I don't remember, Ubuntu leadership article that you shared. And it was funny. It was definitely written in a way that I was not expecting. It was very much, here's an example of what it looks like. Oh, great. But Denisha, would you mind? So I don't know if everyone wants to hear about the rugby team in South Africa and, the example, but what is Ubuntu leadership from more of the academic standpoint?
Yeah. So I always like to break things down and we can go from there. But like the me to we, like Western society is very hyper individualized, right? The we is more so like collectivism. And so I think to understand what Ubuntu leadership really means is that rejection of the lone leader, like the heroic leader. I think a lot of times still like we see leadership as, again, being one person at the top. And so instead of leadership looking like that and feeling like that, it's more so built on that interdependence and collectivism, which, to Diana's point, people are tapping into that in this moment. Need more people to do it. But yes, people are tapping into that collectivism and what it looks like as a community to be on that opposite end of individualism. And so in practice, that's going to mean things like checking on the decisions that we're making. Are they actually uplifting everybody here, or are the loudest people in the room the ones that are being uplifted only, right? And so it allows us to kind of like center that. I think empathy is a big thing that comes into Ubuntu leadership then. What else? Reciprocity. Again, we were talking about mentorship earlier and it being bi-directional. And I think Ubuntu has the ability to capture those things as another way of leadership. Yeah.
I know one thing that seemed, I don't know, and I don't necessarily know because I'm not a manager. I just read a lot of, like Wall Street Journal articles and like Business Today articles. But I know Ubuntu leadership really did have a level of respect for people who had some level of seniority, less because of seniority that they were like the president of a company and more the seniority of experience, age and wisdom, like a sense of, having lived a life means you have something to still share no matter your actual age. But I know that a lot of young professionals, one of the things that is written about them, not necessarily by them, is a sense of, I need to do something now. I need to be doing something meaningful now. Like my opinion is important and I need to be a part of the decisions now. Denisha, in terms of your understanding of Ubuntu leadership, would you see the two being at odds? Would you be seeing that possibly that attitude is less about they wouldn't like Ubuntu leadership versus people are really sort of chafing at the Western hero leader narrative? And if they had a different way, they'd be totally fine with, caring about senior or respecting seniority in terms of age and wisdom again?
I think so. For me, even with Ubuntu, it's because that principle, I am because we are, right? I am because you are. I mean, it goes both ways, right? And so, yeah, there's that respect. But I think for the younger generation, seeing that, then that means that you are here too. Like we are all here. And so I do think the application is something that can also, and I don't want to say like think, I utilize these principles in my own leadership. So I think that I have the opportunity to work with the young people as well. And being able, you get to capture them. It's like, I can't take away the fact that I am your auntie, right? I'm older than you. You see me as older than you. So then because of the way that you've been socialized, you may or may not give me a level of respect based on my age, but also you then get to see yourself reflected in me and you. So I do think that it allows all of the voices in the room, and that's something that is desirable by any person, because the principles of Ubuntu, like I'll tell you in my PhD program, one of my teachers, God bless his spirit, was like, is this just for Black people? And I was like, are any of the leadership theories we've been talking about just for white people? Like, no, they are universal, right? And so like, we're talking about universal principles that people feel good when they experience them, right? Like, oh, wow, this person had empathy towards me. Oh, wow, this person thinks of me highly enough to give me responsibility. Oh, wow, like I get to also help build this ship. Like these are normal, not normal, I don't want to use that word, but these are general ways and universal ways of being. And so, no, it's not about just like, oh, Ubuntu, that can only be applied with this one particular group of people. Again, it matches through all groups if we start breaking down those, just taking the name out of it and start looking at the actual behaviors and principles that are inside of the leadership model.
Mm-hmm. And I know in the author's example of Ubuntu leadership, of the rugby coach, it also had a lot of the kind of culturally responsive practices sort of built in. And it was a small example, it just knowing that their competitors were Japanese and sort of honoring them by, using some of their language, using one of their kind of honorific, I think it was a term, I can't remember the term, but like for a bow as part of the speech, like acknowledging, and respecting them, their journey, how they got there as well as part of the discussion. So Ubuntu does kind of feel like it I know we're not checking boxes. I know we're not about just checking the boxes, but does really seem to capture a lot of the values that one would want to see in practicing culturally responsive leadership. Am I oversimplifying it, or am I putting Ubuntu leadership kind of on a pedestal? It's like, that's the best leadership because it does the things we want.
So I will also say this. One of the things for my dissertation, again, I'm not in the dissertation phase just yet, but in the preparatory stage, it was very important for me. My research is based on African-centered leadership, but also I've included liberatory leadership as well. So for me, it's not a one or the other. You can have any type of leadership model that doesn't fully encapsulate liberation or anti-oppression, right? And so for me, I think whatever we choose, because we learned this phrase when I was in grad school, it's called the dodo bird effect. All of one almost have prizes. And so what that means is that we can look at so many different leadership models and say, aha, I looked at servant leadership for years and said, aha, until I started feeling like a workhorse and feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm just like carrying too much, right? And it just didn't feel like an aha moment to me anymore. It was a new aha that I need to go find something else that matched what I was also experiencing. And so I do think Ubuntu leadership has so much to offer us, absolutely, just like I think other leadership styles do. But in terms of just like you said, those values that it captures, so many of them are the ones that I think are so important to us in any type of relationship that you are in. And that's why that matters to me, because it's like breaking down this like professional dynamic that we have. And that's the only time that we want to talk about being in a relationship with other people. Absolutely not. I want to make sure that I can be interdependent in my own life. I want to have empathy. I want to be able to exude compassion. I want to feel respect and to be respectful of other people. I want to always look at your own dignity, right? I want to make sure that there's reciprocity. And so these values are not just something that come up at work. They are like, they fit with and resonate with who I am as well, and how I want to experience life with others too.
Okay.
I like that.
Me too.
Denisha, do you mind sharing a couple examples of, I mean, you've mentioned like one or two kind of as we've gone through a few of the different, discussion areas, but of how Ubuntu leadership could look like in behavior analysis, or does look like, when you feel you're practicing it as a leader in behavior analysis. The rugby examples are great. I don't know if everyone's going to be able to generalize those.
I don't know how to play.
I'm like at a loss. I'm like, oh, rugby, yikes.
Yeah, I've never tried to play the game myself.
I used to play. I played for
good.
Oh, so sorry, Denisha. Let me ask Jackie about you, because Jackie played rugby. That's probably the important part of that article, right? The rugby.
To be fair, I don't remember the rules. Because I was a very small person when I was playing rugby, and so I was at the end, and so they would just throw me the ball, and I would run as fast as I can so I wouldn't get beaten up.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
So there you
but
go.
You were probably the coach was probably using Ubuntu leadership and saying, even though Jackie's tiny and could get smooshed, she still has an important part to play on our team, and we value her.
I don't know about that, but that's okay. That wasn't very good.
Things
either.
have come a long way. Denisha will have other examples.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll try to wrap in some of those from the article that can be seen like in our day-to-day. Number one, I think, is that there's like this egalitarian mindset and like the collective that you saw in there. So yeah, we're from two different sides of the coin, but how do we fit and merge into one, right? And so I tell people this all the time: no matter where you go, you're creating a new culture. What you're bringing and what they're bringing, now we've created something new. And so that's what it looks like to also have that collective mindset versus like the hierarchical, somebody merges to my culture, right? Like, no, we're creating a new one together. On the other side of that, then that's like relational. Like, how are we looking at the relationships that exist between anybody that is inside of this space? Diana, you said something earlier, and I think that also is how you see it in practice, the focus on humanity. So yes, it was written, right? And it's written for a reason, efficiency, right?
Right.
But let's focus on humanity. And so I think that's the other part, is like kind of being able to balance those two. That's going to be the difference between like being more so Western centric versus like this Ubuntu African centeredness. I would say, especially in behavior analysis, like we think the better or the more titles we acquire, then like we're establishing like some authority, and that creates the power for us. But I think in Ubuntu leadership is more so like power through connection. Like, how are we connected actually versus the places you go? So yeah, I would say the relationship, who's making decisions, and how the egalitarian nature, the collective, and honoring the relationships. Yeah.
Well, I am a big fan of the Ubuntu leadership. I know the district I work in had last year, that was like Ubuntu was the term. So we got all the stickers and things, which, it's always fun to see people using new terms. Do they all stick as well and follow through? I'm not sure. I haven't done the deep dive, but it is, I think, a valuable leadership style that I wish you could practice more, because, man, I don't know about everyone else. I'm a little tired of some of the Western-centered hero leadership styles. They all kind of are frustrating. But
we in my class we talk about weird culture, right? So it's like a Western, educated, individualized, rich, and democratic. Does anybody else know if I got that right? I think I did, but
that spells weird. So
is it industrialized?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
It very well could be for the eye. Yeah. For weird versus non-weird culture. And I pair that up with talking about like, there's like an awesome graphic of like an iceberg of culture, and talking about how like the very top level of culture is the things that we always think about. Like, oh, this culture has this kind of food and dance and religion, but the important stuff, the deeper stuff you don't actually see. And so we could be entering into, our relationships with very different ideas and understandings of what it means to be a leader, what it means to be in any type of relationship with someone, right? Like what power means. Like all of those are things that we can't see about one another's culture and often don't even realize about our own culture, and recognizing that that's like a value for us, right? So like trying to introduce those ideas to my students and helping them see like, you might not even know how you think about this thing. And once you figure that out, then also recognizing that other people may not think that same way, right? Like that understanding that you have is not the only way to think about that. And so these types of supervisory relationships fit into that, as well as, many other aspects of how we're interacting with one another and with our clients too. And the more that we can talk about those things and have these types of conversations, it really can open up your understanding of your place in the world and how you're going to decide to be towards other people too. So I recommend that.
Love that. And I want to say too, like Ubuntu, like it's not an easy way of being. When we start having moments of conflict, right? When things look different than the way that they were written, that's when that discomfort sets in. And it's very easy as human beings to want to cling to what we've always known and what's worked in the past, which is going to probably be something transactional, maybe also something punitive, right? And so it requires like a deep sitting inside of these ideals and values. And sometimes people are like, I don't have time for that. It's not efficient, right? And so it won't work for people who are unwilling to be uncomfortable for a little bit longer, and also know that it's not quick. I think that's another thing that is like connected with, again, the Western way of being, that we want things immediately done. And kind of moving on to this, it requires you to take more time. Let's sit down. Even there is an African decision-making model that I've learned and been glad to learn that. Oh, it takes a long time because you're supposed to actually hear from everybody. You're not supposed to leave this room until we reach a new consensus. Do you know how I said, like, we create a new culture? Yeah, well, we need to create a new consensus before we go. It's not, well, the loudest person said that that's what they wanted to do, so I'm just going to sit here until I can convince everybody else to come to what I say. No, it's like, well, I need to hear your perspective. How do we wrap in your perspective inside of this? Or let's talk through that perspective, because sometimes when you need to get things done, like if the ship is sinking, we don't have time to sit here and listen to somebody say, well, don't do this thing. We're all going to die. Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it just requires you to slow down way more. Again, it's the antithesis of how we've been conditioned living in this United States of America. Yeah. And so it's not comfortable for a lot of people, and a lot of people actually go against it. And that's okay. It's like in your own timing, or maybe not. But I know, like, this is just where I am in my timing. I want to continue to like be there and be willing to be uncomfortable with what it looks like to actually be empathetic and actually care about community and also be accountable. Like, in order for me to be accountable to my community, I also have to be able to be accountable to myself. And so, yeah, I think Ubuntu just allows us to start thinking about it in that way.
Excellent. Well, I think this is a good place to start pulling into the dissemination station.
Chicka, 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 chicka.
Oh,
It was a slow train. I like that.
Slow train here today.
Just, I hear the train.
You gotta be thoughtful.
Efficiency is not everything. Sometimes,
sometimes you just need to be thoughtful.
There.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I think
hard.
that was the dissemination
efficiency.
station, guys. So
I know.
I'm done.
So listen before the dissemination station, for the dissemination station. These are some questions that came after we got to the dissemination station that are kind of related, I suppose. So, Denisha, I know kind of, where you are in the dissertation process. Perhaps you don't want to be thinking about other research questions other than like the one you gotta research and write about yourself. Let's embrace the chaos of what are the big kind of research questions about leadership? Because certainly I hear about Ubuntu leadership. I hear you speaking about some of the power of the different leadership styles, a level of flexibility going between the leadership styles as well, that could be contextual, that could be based more on sort of creating a whole new leadership style that merges some of the strengths from the different cultural leadership styles. But what are the kind of the leadership questions that maybe we don't know about? They sound good, or we're able to chat about them, but we don't necessarily know which one's leading to certain outcomes, or which one is the easiest maybe to teach at scale? I don't know. Like, there's so many questions you could have. Like, are there areas that you're like, I want to know this about leadership? Like, someone tell me, here are the facts, or I got to find these facts myself, potentially.
Yeah, you're right. When I saw this question, I was like, oh, I don't want to think about research today. My homework is due tonight. Wow. No. But I honestly, this level of leadership or this area of leadership is understudied, especially like in leadership areas. So like industrial organizational psychology. So like, obviously it's like kind of behavior analysis. Like it's a newer field, but it's old enough to have a lot of research and there's basically nothing. And even my professors who work at big Fortune 500 companies or like have been consultants, they're like, what is this? And so a lot of times, unfortunately, I just feel like that is the connection to research that I have is like, there's a gap. And so I would like to see those gaps filled. Like we know that there is a lot of data and research right now on psychological safety, right? So I am wrapping that into my dissertation because I need stuff that's already been proven. But for me, I would like to see what are the impacts of taking a more liberatory stance to leadership? And so again, that's where African-centered, anti-oppressive, liberatory leadership comes in for myself. I want to measure that. I want to see what that looks like. What is then this concept of psychological safety? What does that look like then if we have these things in place? That's like my dissertation almost in a nutshell. So if anybody is listening, let me know if you have some literature for me to read. But anyway, so I want to see that. I want to see how does that measure up against some of the things that matter to us, like retention, right? Does that impact retention at all? I would like to also see how people capture it. So I think it's important, taking an approach. It's one thing to say, well, this happens. I think that happened a lot when we start talking about diversity, where people are like, well, guess what? Your business will make more money if you have a diverse workforce. And people are like, yes, go make more money because capitalism wins.
Right.
And so I don't want to do anything like that. But I want to know the good impacts of it, but I also want to know what it feels like. So I want to be able to get the information from people who are experiencing that. So I think that's where I focused on more so is like knowing what it feels like and then also knowing the measurable outcomes, also being able to do those observations in person and writing down like, okay, so when we say empathy, this is what we meant. Like these are some actual examples of it. And then this is what it felt like for that person to receive it. So those would be some of the areas that I would want to see in our research. I want evidence for liberation because I believe liberation is possible for all people. And I believe there's a reason that people don't want us to feel that way or believe it. But I want to be one of the people that is saying, look, we already know it, but I want to also be able to show it in the literature as well.
Okay.
It's very uplifting.
Yeah. My last question kind of comes into, practice. So for folks who are maybe not as interested in the research, like that sounds great. Read it when it comes out. Right now, I got to go to work tomorrow and I got to make sure that I am using the most supportive leadership practices I can. We're still, behavior analysis is still a majority white field, meaning that many leaders, even if you are in a diverse setting, you most likely are white. And, are there good practices that would be really key to keep in mind when it comes to leadership to continue creating supportive environments for our, BIPOC behavior analysts that you would recommend that folks are looking into, reflecting on, practicing daily?
The most important daily practice, I would say, is not going to be, even though, again, everything is relational, but I do think the most important practice is, especially for those who have the ability. And if you're in a workplace where they used to say, like, your skin was your protection, right? That was like a saying. So if you are white in your workplace, really considering ways that what you can do right now, no matter how small it is, to help redistribute power within your workplace. Like, that's going to be a thing that I say is a daily practice. And that's the one that really matters. I think it's one thing, for people to say, like, oh, I really believe that a system should change. It's another to know that you're part of helping that system change as well, and that you can do that every day.
Okay. So very, very helpful. Thank you so much. Denisha Gingles, thank you for coming on the show again. It's always great to have you back. I usually ask if people could reach out, where could they reach out? But I'm guessing you're getting to a point where you would rather not have a bunch of people bothering you because you have a lot of work you're trying to get done, a lot of your own leadership you have to do with your free time. So do you want me to, people can email us and we'll check in with you at some point.
There we go. I like that. Yeah.
Love that. No, yeah, I do. You can go to my website, DenishaGingles.com is the only place that you can really reach me. But there is an email form on there that'll come to my email. And when I check it, I will check it, but you can do that. I would also say if you're looking for me, look for Baba.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you can't connect with me, contact Baba, figure out ways to donate and give back to spaces like Baba. We talked about today, like the rollback of DEI. And I think that Baba is just another good example for why those type of spaces exist. Like even when they take things out of our field, that we're going to keep doing the work, and we've always done it. And so if anyone's listening and you feel so inclined to give to Baba, I would say go to the website, babainfo.org. And there's a little button at the top that says donate. We also have a monthly donation option as well. So if you're like, what? My company wants to give, $100 to Baba every year, every month, or I personally want to give $10 a month to Baba. I would say consider that. So if you think about me, consider giving to Baba. Please and thank you.
I love it.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we hope everyone enjoyed listening. Denisha, again, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure.
Thank y'all for having me. It's been a blast like always. I really appreciate the funnies. Like I love to laugh, and you all are so funny. You make me smile every single time. So thank you.
Thanks.
One more time, we want to thank Denisha Gingles for coming on the show. We always have such a great time talking with her about some of these very big issues that get a little bit of discussion in our field, but there's always so much more from outside of our field to bring into behavior analysis. And it is always nice to have her lens and all her hats to really contextualize those conversations into actionable steps that practitioners in behavior analysis can take towards culturally responsive leadership. And before we wrap up, let's get to that last section of the show. It's pairings. Diana, that's your cue.
I thought there would be more cue.
I couldn't remember if I say take it away or...
Yes, usually you do.
Do I? Okay.
That's okay. This is Pairings. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes that you might want to check out if you enjoyed this discussion today. And we have several to refer you to. Several times we've talked about leadership and or culturally responsive practices. And so they are as follows, in no particular order. Episode 190, Cultural Humility and Barriers to Leadership with Nasia Srencione Ulazi. Episode 135, Social Justice in ABA with our current guest, Denisha Gingles, as well as Aaron Donovan. Episode 128, Diversity and Inclusion with Adrian Bradley and Kat Jackson. Episode 180, Promoting Ethical Leadership with Manny Rodriguez. Episode 152, The Ethics of Teaching Cultural Responsiveness. And finally, episode 262, Collaboration and Leadership in the School Setting with Bruce Tenor. I also like to recommend a snack to go with the episode as well. So today's snack, I thought it would be appropriate for it to be a potluck, right? Everybody bring something that they enjoy to the table. But I also wanted it to be a well-labeled potluck because I feel like that is a compassionate practice when you can see on there, does it have peanuts? Does it have salt? Does it have gluten? Right? I always appreciate it when I'm at a buffet or a potluck and everything is labeled well because it allows everyone to feel safe and included. And that's an important part of cultural responsiveness too. So that was Pairings. Please enjoy.
All right. Thanks, Diana. And thank you all so very much for listening. This was our episode on culturally responsive leadership practices. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Denisha Gingles. And if you want to learn more, certainly check out the links to the articles that were discussed. They are a lot of them not from our field. So it's always interesting to read from outside ABA when it comes to research. We certainly would love for you to leave us a review wherever you like to leave a review, subscribe to our podcast, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Certainly you can go, like I said, to our website, abainsidetrack.com to find links to the articles as well as to purchase CEs if you would like. And speaking of purchasing CEs, you're going to want the second code word when you get there. It's Ubuntu, Ubuntu. You know what it is if you listened to the whole episode. I hope so. Or at least you have a beginning understanding of what it is, I should say. Also, if you want even more ABA Inside Track, please check us out at patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can subscribe at really any level. But at the $5 and $10 levels, you start getting a lot of bonuses, including you get everything, all of our episodes ahead of time, a week ahead of time, access to our polls for listener choice and book club episodes, and free CEs. At the $5 level, you get free CEs for our listener choice episodes, which we do once a season. And at $10 and up, you're able to get access to our book clubs right when they come out and 2 free CEs for each of those. And we do those similarly once per season. That's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. And to wrap up, some final big thanks. Big thanks, of course, to our guest, Denisha Gingles, to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro, outro music, Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye!